All right, today we're tackling one of the most pivotal and controversial events of the 20th century. We're talking about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an act that brought a world war to a screeching halt but, at the same time, unleashed a brand new kind of fear upon the entire world.
So let's start not at the beginning of the war, but right at the critical moment. Picture this. It's 8:15 in the morning, August 6th, 1945. A single American B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, is flying high over the Japanese city of Hiroshima.
For the people on the ground, the experience was something they came to call picadone. A pica, a brilliant, blinding flash of light, followed by a don, a deafening, booming sound. In a single instant, their entire world was just incinerated. This was the very first time a nuclear weapon was used in war.
So the big question is, how on earth did we get here, right? A moment like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. To really understand why this weapon was used, we have to rewind and take a hard look at the brutal endgame of World War II.
By the summer of 1945, the war in the Pacific had become this absolutely gruesome, grinding war of attrition. The Allies were closing in on Japan, no doubt, but the cost in human lives was just skyrocketing.
And if you want to understand just how fierce the Japanese resistance was, you only need to look at these numbers. I mean, in the battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Japanese forces fought almost to the very last man. This level of ferocity led Allied planners to a really grim conclusion. Invading the Japanese mainland was going to be a catastrophic bloodbath. That invasion plan had a name: Operation Downfall. And let me tell you, it was set to be the largest amphibious assault in the history of the world, way bigger than D-Day. Japan knew it was coming, too. They had 2.3 million soldiers and a civilian militia of 28 million people ready to defend their home islands.
In the potential cost, well, it was just staggering. One study prepared for the Secretary of War projected up to 800,000 American deaths, not to mention millions of Japanese casualties. When you're facing numbers like that, you start getting desperate for an alternative. Any alternative.
Now here's something that's absolutely crucial to remember. The atomic bomb wasn't happening in isolation. American B-29s were already waging a devastating firebombing campaign. In just 6 months, they'd hit 64 cities. A single raid on Tokyo back in March 1945 killed an estimated 100,000 people. Think about that. It was the deadliest single air raid in all of history.
So this desperation, this need for another way to end the war, led them to a secret project, one that offered a very different and, frankly, a far more terrifying path forward.
You see, the Manhattan Project was born out of this deep fear that Nazi Germany would build an atomic weapon first. It became this colossal, top-secret operation. At its peak, it employed over 125,000 people and ended up creating 2 totally different types of atomic bombs. One called Little Boy, which used uranium, and the other, Fat Man, which used plutonium.
Okay, so you've built the ultimate weapon. Now what? Well, a target committee was formed to decide where to use it, and the process was just cold and strategic. They wanted a big urban target, somewhere the blast would be devastatingly effective, and get this, a city that hadn't already been bombed to bits, so they could clearly measure just how powerful their new weapon was.
Believe it or not, the ancient city of Kyoto was actually a primary target, but the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, who had a personal connection to the city's incredible cultural heritage, he stepped in and had it taken off the list. And in its place, they added Nagasaki.
The final diplomatic move came on July 26th. The Allies issued something called the Potsdam Declaration, basically telling Japan to surrender unconditionally or face prompt and utter destruction. The response from Japan's prime minister was one word: mokisatsu. Now, this is a tricky word. It can mean to ignore, or it can mean to treat with silent contempt. The Allies took it as a defiant rejection, and with that, the stage was set.
So, the ultimatum was rejected. All the pieces were in place. The order was given. The world was about to witness the dawn of a terrifying new age. Hiroshima was hit first on August 6th with the Little Boy bomb. Japan still didn't surrender. So just 3 days later, Nagasaki was hit with the Fat Man bomb. And just look at those numbers. The estimated death tolls by the end of that year alone, they're just horrific.
You know, even with all that planning, chance still plays a huge role.
In Hiroshima, a crosswind actually pushed the bomb a bit off its intended target, a bridge. It didn't make much of a difference. It ended up detonating almost directly over a hospital, leading to the absolute destruction of the entire city center. Now here's a crazy fact. The Fat Man bomb dropped on Nagasaki was actually more powerful than the one used on Hiroshima. But the city's geography, all its hills and valleys, actually ended up containing the initial blast. It confined the worst of the destruction to the Urakami Valley, sparing other parts of the city. A strange kind of geographical luck.
6 days after the bombing of Nagasaki, and with the Soviet Union now invading Manchuria, Emperor Hirohito finally announced Japan's surrender. World War II was over. But the consequences of these two bombs, they were just getting started.
The survivors, known in Japan as the hibakusha, which literally means explosion-affected people, they faced horrors that are almost impossible for us to comprehend. It wasn't just surviving the blast and the firestorm. Many died in the weeks and months that followed from radiation sickness, and those who lived on faced long-term health problems and a heavy social stigma for decades.
And this leads us right into the heart of the debate that still rages today. Was it necessary? Supporters argue that yes, the bombs saved more lives than they took by preventing that bloody invasion. But critics strongly disagree. They contend Japan was already on the verge of collapse and that the bombings were an unnecessary war crime, maybe even used as an early warning shot to the Soviet Union.
The American monopoly on nuclear weapons, it lasted just 4 years. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its own bomb, and that kicked off the nuclear arms race that would define the Cold War, bringing the world to the brink of annihilation more than once.
So that leaves us with this final, heavy question. Were the bombings a terrible but necessary act that ended the world's deadliest conflict? Or were they the opening shot of a brand new era of existential threat? The reign of ruin from those 2 days continues to cast a long shadow over our world. And answering that question about its legacy, well, that remains one of history's most profound and unsettling challenges.